No one remembers Ethan anymore. Not the friends, not the teachers, not even the school system. But I do. I remember the look in his eyes when he first read that crumpled note. Scribbled words, run. Now he didn't run. Not fast enough. Not soon enough. I don't know exactly how he vanished. No one really does. One day his records were gone, and the space he left behind didn't seem to matter. Only I still hear the soft tapping behind the lockers each morning. See the shadow glide past the mirror with no one walking by. I see him in the security footage, just standing, smiling, never blinking. They say people like Ethan don't really leave. They stay, but they're no longer who they were. So, if you ever find a note in your locker, if you hear footsteps with no one there, if the mirror fogs over and inside it, you're smiling, even though you're not, do what Ethan didn't do. Run now. Part 1. The nameless note. It started with a crumpled note, barely the size of a credit card, wedged between Ethan's textbooks and a torn flyer for chess club tryouts. The note was yellowed, its corners brittle like old parchment, and on it, scrawled in thick, smudged black ink, were just 2 words: run now. That was it. No name, no signature, no explanation. Just a command that made no sense. Ethan stared at it while the hallway bustled around him. Lockers slamming and shoes squeaking across waxed tile. The lunch bell had just rung, and the scent of chicken nuggets and overcooked vegetables hovered in the air like a cloud that wouldn't disperse. He half expected someone to jump out laughing, a prank from the theater kids, or maybe Jake from gym class, who thought fake notes and fart noises were peak comedy, but no one came. And when Ethan turned around, the hallway behind him was oddly empty. For a second, it felt colder, like the air had shifted. The laughter and chatter from the cafeteria down the hall sounded muffled, as if his ears had dipped underwater. He looked at the note again. Run. Now, seriously, he mumbled, stuffing it into his hoodie pocket. Somebody's bored. By 6th period, he'd almost forgotten about it. Mr. Holman's droning lecture on the Pythagorean theorem had that effect. Ethan sat near the back of the math room, staring at the clock. The second hand ticked forward, then seemed to hesitate. Just a blink too long. Then it ticked again. The girl in front of him, Jamie, he thought, suddenly sat up straighter. He noticed her glance behind her, toward the classroom door. Nothing there. Then he heard it. A shuffle, a step, but not from the hallway. It was coming from the ceiling. From the vent, Ethan glanced up. The ceiling tiles were those cheap foam ones you could push open with a pencil. The vent above his desk was slightly ajar, a single screw dangling. A dark shadow moved behind it. He couldn't see what it was, but it was definitely ... shifting. A scraping sound followed, like something being dragged across metal. His chest tightened. He leaned back in his seat, heart suddenly hammering. Ethan, Mr. Holman snapped. Focus. Ethan blinked. The scraping stopped. The vent was closed. Had it ever been open? Was he just tired? After class, he checked his locker. The note was gone. He dug through his hoodie pocket, his backpack, even between the pages of his geometry book. Nothing gone, like it had never existed. And yet the feeling, that sensation of being watched stuck to him like a film he couldn't peel off. He walked the halls slower than usual, glancing over his shoulder more than once. At one point, in the stairwell leading down to the old science wing, he thought he heard whispering, just faint enough to make him doubt. The next morning, Ethan got to school early. The locker rows were silent, lit by flickering fluorescents. His locker door had a dent in it, probably from when someone kicked it during a fire drill last year. As he turned the lock to 7146, he noticed something odd. There were scratches on the metal, not random ones, either, parallel deep, like fingers. He opened the locker slowly. Another note, same paper, same ink, but this time it said, "You didn't run." He dropped it like it burned. A janitor's cart clattered in the distance, followed by the humming of a floor buffer. Ethan looked around, but no one was near. He picked the note back up with shaking fingers. The handwriting looked almost like it had been etched, not written. Like whoever or whatever wrote it had pressed too hard. He shoved it into his backpack and closed his locker. The lights above him flickered. He felt it again. That heaviness in the air. The pressure, a subtle shift in atmosphere, like when a thunderstorm is about to break but the clouds haven't opened yet. And somewhere, just at the edge of hearing, a whisper, not words, just sound, a breath that didn't belong. Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time and didn't stop moving until he was inside the cafeteria, surrounded by noise and people and the safe chaos of normal. But even then, he could feel it, watching, waiting. He didn't tell anyone. How do you explain something like that without sounding insane? But that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized something that chilled him more than the notes, more than the whispers, more than the shadow in the vent. He was absolutely sure that when he closed his locker that afternoon, he heard a soft click from inside, as if someone was closing it back from within. Part 2. The message on the whiteboard. The first thing Ethan noticed that morning wasn't the pale light streaming through the blinds or the smell of burnt toast from the kitchen downstairs. It was the silence. That particular kind of silence. That feels like a held breath. Still, dense, waiting. His mum had already left for work, and the house felt emptier than usual. Even the cat, Oreo, was nowhere to be seen. Ethan grabbed his backpack, trying to shake off the strange sensation that something had shifted since last night. The lingering memory of the note still pressed at the back of his mind. Run now. He hadn't told anyone, not even Ben. It felt too ... weird. Like a prank, but the kind that didn't come with a punchline. School looked the same from the outside. Same cracked steps, same brown lockers with graffiti half scrubbed off, same echo of morning announcements crackling over the intercom. But when Ethan stepped into his first period class, something wasn't right. The classroom was empty here. Was early, but it wasn't the silence that caught him off guard. It was the whiteboard, scrawled in thick black marker, just below the daily objectives, with 3 words written in a shaky, almost childlike script. You didn't listen. The words were uneven, like someone had written them in a rush or with trembling hands. Ethan's heart gave a single hard thud. He looked around, half expecting to see a friend pop out from under a desk, laughing, but the room remained still. He walked closer, reached out, and stopped. The marker was dry, like the words had been there a while. He blinked, took a step back, then, just as the first student walked in, Ethan glanced back, and the words were gone. No trace, not a smear, not a ghost of black ink. Nothing. Dude, Ben said, flopping into the seat next to him. You look like you just saw Mr. Cleary without his wig on. Ethan forced a laugh. Didn't sleep great. He didn't mention the board, or the note, or the way his stomach was tying itself into tight, uneasy knots. The rest of the school day dragged. Every squeak of sneakers in the hallway made Ethan flinch. Every gust of wind through a cracked window made him glance up. Nothing else happened until night fell. He was home alone again. His mum was covering a late shift at the hospital, and the house settled into its creaks and whispers. He'd convinced himself it was just a prank. Maybe someone messed with him. Maybe it wasn't even meant for him. But curiosity is a strange, stubborn thing. He checked the security camera app on his phone, the one connected to the cheap outdoor cam his mom had installed after someone egged their house last Halloween. It faced the porch, the driveway, and caught a sliver of his bedroom window. Most nights, the playback was boring. A squirrel, a delivery guy, a raccoon once, digging through the trash. But tonight, as he scrubbed through the footage, something stopped him cold. 3:02 a.m., the porch light flickered once, then steadied. A tall figure stepped into frame. It wasn't a person, at least not in any way Ethan could recognize. It had a body humanoid in shape, but no face, no features at all, like someone had wrapped its head in gauze or shadows. It stood motionless, angled toward Ethan's bedroom, just stood there for 5 minutes. And then, with the same calm, deliberate stillness, it turned and walked off frame. Ethan stared at the screen, his breath caught in his throat. He played it again, same thing. And somehow that made it worse, because it meant he hadn't imagined it. He took a shaky breath, locking the windows, pulling the blinds, turning on every light. Back in his room, he checked the camera again, live view. Nothing, just the empty porch. But the window behind him creaked. He spun around. No one was there. Just the curtain swaying slightly, as if stirred by a breath. He didn't sleep much that night. Not really. Not with that image burned into his mind. You didn't listen. He tried telling Ben the next morning, but the words wouldn't come out right. It sounded crazy. The note, the whiteboard, the footage. So he stayed quiet. He kept watching, kept waiting. Because if something had warned him, if something had left that note, then maybe he hadn't run fast enough. Maybe he hadn't run at all. Part 3, a name that shouldn't existed, started with a glitch in the yearbook. Not the digital version, but the old, dusty, physical copies that sat untouched in the back of the school library. Ethan hadn't meant to go looking through them. Honestly, he just needed a quiet place to eat lunch after the whole not in the locker incident and that nightmarish moment with the whiteboard. He wanted something normal, concrete, something that didn't vanish when you turned your head. So when he pushed open the creaky wooden door of the library's archive room, he was just looking for a distraction. He found a mystery. He flipped open the 2019 yearbook. Page after page of student faces smiled back at him, some goofy, some bored, some too serious. And then, in the junior class section, he noticed something strange. A boy sitting in the back row of a group photo, slightly blurry, just a little off, his smile too wide, his eyes too dark. Ethan squinted, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. The name beneath the photo, Mason Clare. Ethan didn't recognize the name, but that wasn't surprising. He was a freshman then. Still, there was something about the photo that stuck with him, like that smile was meant for him. Watching him, curiosity nagged at his brain. He pulled out the 2018 book. There he was, again, same name, same blurry face, same too wide smile. Ethan flipped further, back 2017, 2016, even 2012. Mason Clare was in all of them, always in the back row, always slightly out of focus, always smiling. But no one, Ethan realized, ever seemed to notice him. No club photos. No sports teams. No mentions in the senior quotes. Just that one photo, year after year. Who the hell are you? Ethan whispered aloud, alone in the archive room. That's when he noticed something else. On the inside cover of the 2015 yearbook, written in faded blue ink, "Don't say his name out loud." Ethan froze. He hadn't heard anyone come in, but now, the door behind him was closed, and he was absolutely sure he'd left it cracked open. Suddenly, the air in the archive felt thick, like the room was inhaling. He shoved the books back on the shelf and bolted. That night, Ethan lay in bed, the glow of his laptop painting his ceiling in a soft blue light. He typed Mason Clare into every search engine he could think of. Nothing. Not on Facebook. Not on old-school newsletters. Not even a single mention in any local newspapers. He even asked his mum, who had graduated from the same school in 2002, Mason Clare. She repeated, stirring her tea. "Doesn't ring a bell." "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Just some name I saw. Friend of yours?" "Not exactly." She looked up from her mug. "Everything okay?" He nodded too quickly. At 1:17 a.m., Ethan got out of bed. He couldn't sleep. Something kept itching at the back of his mind, like a word you almost remember but can't quite catch. He walked over to his closet, pulled out his backpack, and took out the yearbook he'd taken without thinking. Page 112. There. Mason Clare. Only now the face was closer, zoomed in, still blurry, still smiling, but his head was tilted ever so slightly. To the left. Ethan didn't remember it like that. He flipped to the front of the book. The words, "Don't say his name out loud," were now on the title page. Printed, not written. He shut the book with a thud and backed away like it had bitten him. Then, he heard it. A knock, not at the door. Not at the window from the closet. 3 soft knocks, tap, 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 tap. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe, and then came the whisper, right behind his left ear, so close it tickled. "You said it." The next morning, Ethan didn't go to school. His mum assumed he had the flu. He didn't correct her. Instead, he sat at his desk, flipping through the yearbook again and again, trying to make sense of what he saw. Every time he opened it, the page was different. Sometimes Mason was gone. Sometimes there were 2 of him, always smiling. Ethan scrolled through his phone and sent a message to Taylor, his closest friend. "Ethan, do you know anyone named Mason Clare, Taylor, who Ethan from school? He's in all the yearbooks." Taylor, "Dude, what yearbooks, Ethan?" "The school ones, Taylor. We haven't done yearbooks in like 5 years. Ethan stared at the message. Wait, that wasn't true. He held the 2019 book in his hand, printed, bound, with signatures and everything. He opened it, blank pages, every page, except for one, Mason Clare, smiling, closer than ever. This time, Ethan could see his teeth. Too many of them. He dropped the book and ran to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. When he looked up at the mirror, there was nothing behind him, just the reflection, just Ethan, but his mouth, was smiling without him, and somewhere, just faint enough to sound like your own thoughts, a voice whispered, "You remembered me, that's all it takes." Part 4. The frozen clock and repeating date was 10:08 a.m. when the school clock froze, not ticked, not glitched. It just stopped, perfectly, still like time had chosen to hold its breath. Ethan noticed it first in English class. The old analog clock above the whiteboard, the one that usually groaned a second behind real time, suddenly stood frozen. 10:08. He blinked, looked again. The second hand didn't twitch. Miss Carlyle's lesson kept going. Chalk on board, her voice droning about Hemingway's iceberg theory, but Ethan couldn't stop staring. He glanced at his phone, also 10:08. 10 minutes later, still 10:08. That afternoon, he brought it up to his best friend, Marcus. "You sure it wasn't just broken?" Ethan shook his head. "It's not just the classroom one. The hallway clocks, the science lab, even my phone wouldn't refresh." Marcus frowned but shrugged. "Weird, I didn't notice anything." That was the first time Ethan wondered if it was just him. The second time came the next day, again. 10:08 a.m. Again, everything stopped except the people. Teachers kept teaching. Students kept typing, drawing, whispering. But when Ethan checked, the clocks, every single one on campus, they all stood frozen. He started writing things down in his notebook. Date, time, what he saw. But something felt off. The handwriting was jagged, letters slanted, unfamiliar, like someone had written with his hand but not with his mind. That night, while flipping through his notes, he found entries he didn't remember writing. Don't follow the echo. There were 3 of us in the bathroom, but only 2 walked out. And most chilling, you've already forgot her name. He stared at that line until the ink felt like it pulsed on the page. Forgot who? The next morning, at exactly 10:08, someone vanished. Her name was Mia Caldwell. Ethan had seen her in math class. Pink headphones, always doodling on her shoes. But when he looked around at 10:09, when the clock unfroze her seat was empty, he whispered to the girl next to him, "Where's Mia?" The girl frowned. "Who?" Mia Caldwell." She was just sitting right there. The frown deepened. "You okay?" Ethan turned to Mr. Haynes. "Sir, Mia just left." "Who's Mia?" the teacher asked flatly. After class, he ran to the office, looked through the student roster on the computer. No Caldwell, no Mia, nothing. He sprinted to the yearbook room, thumbed through last year's edition, page after page. Her photo was gone. But the strangest part, the spine of the book cracked, like a photo had been torn out and glued back. Ethan sat in the hallway, heart thudding. The clocks had started ticking again. 11:02, but he felt like he was sliding into a place where names didn't stay, and people could be rewritten. That night, he checked his journal again. A new line had appeared. Asterisk, asterisk, she still draws on shoes. The ink was fresh. He hadn't written that. He was sure by the end of the week, Ethan had stopped trusting clocks, or reflections, or memories. Every day at 10:08 a.m., time froze. Sometimes for 1 minute, sometimes 20. The clocks stayed silent. The second hand stuck in a staring contest with eternity. And every time it happened, something shifted. He saw someone walk into the janitor's closet and never come out. Another time, the class took a pop quiz he couldn't remember, then told him it never happened. Worst of all, he caught himself smiling in the mirror one morning, smiling in a way he hadn't intended. The corners of his mouth lifted just a second too long. His eyes didn't follow the smile dot. The next day, his reflection didn't blink when he did. And then there was the door in the science wing, past the anatomy models and dusty frog posters. There was a door labeled room 228. It had always been locked, covered in paper from some old renovation. But at 10:08 a.m. that Friday, he walked past, and saw it cracked open. Inside, nothing but dark. Silent, the air colder than the rest of the school. A whisper came from within. Not a voice, a breath. He reached for the door, but the bell rang, and when he looked back, it was sealed shut again. When he turned to leave, a new message had been written on his journal page. Asterisk, asterisk, you almost followed her. He hadn't brought a pen. Ethan tried to tell Marcus again. Bro, you've been acting seriously off. Are you sleeping? I'm not crazy. I swear people are disappearing. Things are changing. Like Mia. Ethan froze. You remember her? Marcus blinked. Who? Of course. Ethan ran home that afternoon. Locked his bedroom. Covered his mirror. Taped over the camera on his laptop. He opened his journal. On the newest page, only 2 words. Asterisk, asterisk, you're next. Below it, the time, 10:08, but the ink was dry, as if it had been written long ago. Outside, the wind picked up. A power flicker made his clock reset. He waited for it to tick forward. It didn't. 10:08 a.m. It was 7:36 p.m., but the clock said 10:08, and someone was knocking at the closet from the inside. Part 5. The wall behind the locker, you know that hollow sound when you knock on drywall. Ethan heard it behind metal. It was a Tuesday, and the hallway smelled like mop water and cafeteria fries. Nothing unusual until 3rd period. Ethan went to grab his biology book from his locker and heard a soft thunk as the spine bumped against something that wasn't metal. He froze, knocked gently on the back panel. It echoed, a hollow, irregular kind of sound, like the space behind wasn't solid, wasn't supposed to be. He waited until lunch, when the hallway cleared out and the cameras would be on loop delay. He slipped a small screwdriver from his backpack. He'd started carrying tools since the note. Paranoia had become habit. The panel came loose easier than it should have, and behind it, tucked into the narrow crawl space like forgotten mail, were notes, dozens of them. He stared for a full minute. They were crumpled, some yellowed with age, others crisp, like they'd just been written. All carried the same 2 words, run, now, same handwriting, over and over. One had a corner torn off. One had a faded stamp on the back. One had a greasy fingerprint smudged near the bottom. Another was stained a deep, rusty color Ethan didn't want to think about. Then he picked up the one that was still warm. His fingertips recoiled, as if he'd touched skin, not paper. No one else was in the hallway. No heating vents nearby. No explanation. The note looked identical to the others, but it felt recent, like the ink hadn't dried, like whoever wrote it had only just slid it in seconds before. His breath hitched. He turned toward the hallway windows. The sky looked darker than it had. A moment ago, the overhead lights flickered, barely perceptible. He shoved the notes into his backpack, all except the warm one. That one, he folded into his back pocket without thinking. In biology class, he kept checking the clock. 10:08, frozen again. When the bell rang, no one moved, not even the teacher. For a moment, the entire class looked like a paused video. Ethan could almost hear the buzz of silence. Then, as if someone had hit play, everyone blinked and started packing up. No one mentioned the clock that night. In his room, Ethan laid out the notes on his bed like a detective in a crime show. Patterns began to emerge. Some were written in ink, others in pencil, one even in charcoal, but all had the same distinct loops, the same rushed slant, the same slight smudge at the end of the W. He flipped them over, on the backs of 3, Faint imprints showed through from old paper pressed to hard-like reverse. Shadows of sentences that weren't meant to be seen. He rubbed pencil over them. The first said, "They won't let me leave." The second, he sees through mirrors. And the third, scribbled in frantic, sharp pen, "Locker 308 is not empty." Ethan's locker was 307. His heart skipped. He hadn't paid attention to 3008. No one used it this year or last. Maybe it was stuck shut, maybe broken. He couldn't remember anyone ever. Standing beside him, he stared at the wall behind his locker. Something about it didn't line up. The depth felt wrong, the screws misaligned, like it had been rebuilt too many times, like it didn't want to stay shut. He glanced at the warm note again. The ink had begun to fade, almost as if it had been read, as if that was its purpose, and now it was done. At 2:17 a.m., he woke to the sound of metal creaking, a long dragging sound, like a locker door slowly being opened. He sat up. His room was dark except for the faint glow of his phone charging. He didn't move, listened. Another creak. He stood, heart pounding, and checked his closet. Nothing. Window shut. Door locked. Then he realized the sound wasn't coming from inside his room. It was coming through the wall. Behind it, right where the locker would be. He pressed his ear to the drywall. Silence, and then a whisper so soft it barely existed. "Run." He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Light bloomed across the room, erasing the darkness, but not the echo in his mind. He checked his backpack. The notes were gone, only the warm one remained. Still warm, and on its back, written in ink, he didn't. "Remember, don't check 308. Not yet." Ethan sat down on the edge of his bed, hands trembling. Something wasn't just watching him anymore, it was talking, or warning. Maybe both, maybe neither. The wall behind the locker felt closer now, like space was folding inward, like someone or something was waiting on the other side of it, knocking gently, patiently, until he knocked back. Part 6. The 3:13 a.m. call. It started with a call. A sound so mundane, so rooted in everyday life. Yet at 3:13 a.m., the ringtone didn't feel like a notification. It felt like a warning. Ethan sat up, his eyes gritty, heart already thumping like a soft drumbeat in his chest. The phone glowed on his nightstand. Unknown number. He didn't want to answer. He did anyway. He brought the phone to his ear and said, "Hello." Nothing, no static, no wind, no accidental shuffle, just breathing, shallow, deliberate. Inhale, pause, exhale. "Who is this?" Ethan asked, voice low but tense. The breathing stopped, then came the whisper. "If you see it in the mirror, don't turn around." Click. The call ended. The line went dead. Ethan lowered the phone and stared at it, waiting for something else. Another ring, a text, anything. But the screen remained dark, silent. He checked. The call log. No number, no history. Like it hadn't happened at all. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Maybe he'd dreamed it. Maybe he was just too deep into all the weirdness lately. The repeating clock. The notes in his locker. Mason Clare. His mind must be pulling tricks. He got up to get water. As he passed by the hallway mirror, he glanced at his reflection out of habit, except it wasn't a habit tonight. It was a mistake. In the mirror behind him stood someone, not moving, just standing. It was blurry, almost like static. No facial features, no color, just a silhouette. And it was smiling. Ethan froze. His breath caught. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to get out. He spun around, nothing, empty. Hallway, silent. He turned back to the mirror. Gone, he stared at his own face, pale and slick with sweat. He laughed, a single exhale, nervous, hollow. "I'm losing it," he muttered. But he didn't go back to bed. Not yet. He sat at his desk, opened his notebook, the one where he kept track of all the strange things, the frozen clocks, the missing students, Mason Clare, the whisper in the phone. He wrote, 3:13 a.m., got a call from unknown. Voice said, "If you see it in the mirror, don't turn around." Then hung up. He closed the notebook. The silence of the room suddenly felt suffocating. He turned on his desk lamp. Then, just for peace of mind, he opened his phone to check the selfie. Camera, just his own face, until he blinked and saw the figure again, only for a second. Like a glitch behind him, smiling. He dropped the phone. It clattered against the floor, screen cracking. He stood slowly. Didn't look in the mirror again. Instead, he walked back to the hallway. Everything normal to normal. The kind of normal that hides something just under the surface in his peripheral vision. Something twitched at the edge of the mirror. He turned. Off the hallway light, the mirror still glowed, faintly, like it was remembering. He covered it with a towel. But before he went back to bed, he saw something scribbled in marker on the bottom edge of the mirror. He hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't there yesterday, it read. Turning around means choosing. Choosing means staying. He didn't sleep that night. And when he looked in the mirror the next morning, his reflection blinked half a second later than he did. Not enough to notice. Not enough to prove, but enough to feel. And the towel he had put up, it was folded neatly on his desk. He never moved it. Part 7. When Friends Forget You. It started with something small, something I could almost ignore. "What's your name again?" Kevin, my best friend since 3rd grade, blinked at me across the lunch table, genuinely confused. He wasn't joking. His brow furrowed, like he was trying to pull a foggy memory from the back of his mind, but it just wouldn't come. I laughed nervously. "Very funny, it's Ethan." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he looked down at his tray like he was embarrassed, like he'd said something wrong to a stranger. "Right. Ethan," he mumbled, stabbing at his mashed potatoes. That was Monday. By Wednesday, Sarah didn't reply to my texts. On Thursday, she walked past me in the hallway like I wasn't there. Like I was the air dot. It was a kind of forgetting that didn't make sense. Not just a lapse, something deeper, more unsettling. When I waved at my usual table in the cafeteria, nobody waved back. I sat alone, my tray untouched. The background noise of clinking trays and muffled conversation swelling around me like I was underwater. Friday morning, I walked into homeroom and saw my seat 3rd row from the back occupied by someone else. Mrs. Jennings didn't even glance up. "Excuse me," I said. She looked confused. "You're not in this class, are you?" "What do you mean?" "I've been in this class all semester." The other students watched silently as she checked her roster. "What's your name again?" My voice caught in my throat. "Ethan Riley." She scanned the list, frowning. "No Ethan Riley here. Are you new? Maybe transferred in by mistake." My legs felt weak. I left without saying another word. In the library, I logged into a school computer and pulled up the student database. It required a login. Mine was still active. But when I searched my own name, the screen flashed. No results found. I tried the yearbook photo portal, searched by homeroom, then extracurriculars, then manually through every page. I wasn't there, Not in cross country. Not in chess club. Not in last month's pep rally. I remembered that one clearly. I'd stood at the far right with Kevin, our arms slung round each other's shoulders. We'd made dumb faces for the camera. I found the picture. It was the same. Shot, but the space where I had been for right was just empty bleachers. Kevin stood alone, arm out, as if around someone. Someone not there. I stared at it until my eyes burned. What scared me most wasn't that I was gone. It was that the picture didn't look edited. It looked real that night. I tried to talk to my mum. She nodded, distracted by laundry, the TV humming. In the background, "Mum," I said again. "Something's wrong with school, with me. People don't remember me, even teachers, even Kevin." She gave me a look I'll never forget. "Honey, you're probably just overwhelmed. Starting a new school's tough. You'll make friends soon. New school. What do you mean new? We moved here 4 years ago." She paused, her mouth slightly open, like she was about to say something, but then she just turned back to folding shirts. Didn't answer. I went to my room and locked the door. I pulled out every ID card I had. School ID, library pass, gym membership. Only the gym card had my name. The others were blank. Even my driver's permit just said, "Restricted pending verification." I opened my journal, the one I'd been keeping since all this started. The entries were smudged. Some pages had my handwriting, shaky but mine. Others were unfamiliar, blocky letters, different spacing, like someone else had picked up where I left off. Some pages had scribbled lines, across them slashed diagonally, like someone had tried to erase what was written but didn't finish the job. Near the back, I found a sentence I didn't remember writing. "They're making space. One person at a time." I closed the journal slowly. That night, I heard my phone buzz. A text from Kevin. "You okay? I had a weird dream last night. You were in it. You looked scared." I responded quickly. "I'm real, Kev. I'm still here. Please remember." Me, no reply. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then, in the corner of the room, the mirror shimmered. Just for a moment, my reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. Part 8. The locked room and Class 13. Ethan didn't remember there being a room 13 on the school map. He had the map right in front of him, one of those outdated paper copies from the front office. There was room 12A, room 14, the janitor's closet, and a weird unlabeled corner between them. A dead space, but that corner wasn't empty. He'd noticed it by accident, turning down the hallway near the back stairwell. The lights flickered as always, the ones they never seemed to replace. But between the mop bucket stains on the tiles and the peeling paint, there it was, a door. Thick, metal, grey. Unlike the others in the school, this one was chained shut, not just locked. Heavy steel chains crisscrossed the frame like they were trying to keep something in, not just out. A tarnished sign above read, "Room 13." It shouldn't exist. He ran his fingers over the rusted links. The metal warmed to the touch like it had just been handled. Ethan pressed his ear to the door at first. Nothing, then a sound, rhythmic, soft, like chairs creaking, ... or breathing. Many of them. He jolted back, heart pounding. He knew he should walk away, but of course he didn't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. No service. Again, the air around room 13 was colder. Not just a draft, but a slow chill that soaked into the bones. He knelt down, eyeing a narrow space between the frame and the floor. Nothing but darkness. Then he saw it, a movement, a shadow, sliding past, too fast to be clear, but definitely real. Ethan's breath hitched. He stood up and tried the door. It didn't budge, but the chains gave a little, almost like they weren't locked tight. The next day, Ethan waited until the final bell rang. Students emptied the halls, and teachers retreated to their cars, too tired to care what a kid was up to. He walked quietly, eyes alert, backpack slung low, back to the same hallway, back to the chained door. This time, he brought bolt cutters. He had no idea why his dad kept them in the garage, or why Ethan thought to take them. But when he clipped the lock, it didn't feel like breaking in. It felt like opening something that had been waiting. The chains clattered to the floor. Ethan turned the knob. The door creaked. Opened 2 inches. Stuck. The gap was small, but just wide enough. He leaned in. The classroom beyond was dark. Dust floated in the beam of emergency light from the ceiling, barely illuminating anything. Rows of desks, at least 20, and in every one, a student, unmoving, silent, each one sitting upright, eyes open, glassy, staring forward. He froze. The air smelled like old paper and something faintly metallic. Not blood, just wrong. They didn't blink, didn't twitch. Then one of them moved. A girl, second row from the front, slowly turned her head toward him, not like a curious glance. It was precise, controlled. She looked at Ethan, their eyes locked. She smiled, and then she whispered, mouth barely moving, "You're next." Ethan stumbled backward, slamming into the opposite wall. The lights above him flickered violently. The hallway dimmed. The air turned heavy. When he looked back, the door was fully closed. The chains had rewrapped themselves across the handle, dangling in place like they'd never been cut. He ran, didn't stop until he was outside, lungs burning, eyes stinging. The sky looked the same, blue, calm, but something had changed. The next day, Ethan asked 3 different teachers if room 13 existed. All 3 gave the same answer. There is no room 13. There never was. He checked the map again. That corner was gone. Worse, he walked the hallway again. No door, just smooth wall. But that night, in his dreams, he saw her again, sitting in her desk, smiling, and 20 pairs of eyes slowly turning toward him, waiting. Part 9. Cut footage and numb teachers. Strange part wasn't that Ethan forgot what happened. It was that everyone else acted like he hadn't been there at all. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind that feels like it's still shaking off the weekend. Ethan had barely slept. His dreams had been a blur of static and whispers, like someone tuning a radio just out of reach. When he stepped into Westbridge High that morning, the hallway lights flickered overhead. He rubbed his eyes. He hadn't even had his first coffee. Then came the whispers. It wasn't real whispering, more like pressure in his ears. A feeling that someone was speaking, but the sound never reached his brain. He walked to his locker like he always did, past the same posters curling off the bulletin board, the same water fountain with the leak that nobody ever fixed. But the hallway felt wrong, slower somehow, like the floor beneath him was dragging. When he got to his locker, something odd happened. He opened it, tanned, blinked. The next thing he knew, the bell was ringing for 3rd period. That shouldn't have been possible. He had just arrived. He checked his phone, 8:12 a.m. Then again, 11:41 a.m., same spot, same position. He hadn't moved. Not once. The sense of wrongness deepened. What the hell, ... he muttered. He tried to play it off like he'd just zoned out. Maybe he was more tired than he thought. Maybe he had fallen asleep standing up, though that made no sense. But then something else happened. None of the teachers acknowledged his presence. In third period, Mr. Drenner didn't mark him present, didn't glance his way. When Ethan raised his hand to ask a question, the teacher looked through him. Literally, fourth period. Same. His friends didn't even glance up. He touched his arm, just to check if he could still feel something. His fingertips met skin. He was real, wasn't he? At lunch, he sat at his usual spot. The lunch lady didn't hand him a tray. He just sat, watching everyone else live. That night, he went to the school's main office. He had to know if something was wrong with him, if he was having a breakdown, a seizure, anything. He waited until after hours, when the building was locked and the only light came from the buzzing exit signs and the red led by the security room. He picked the door with the thin credit card trick he'd learned from YouTube. He slipped inside. The room smelled like old metal and microwaved dinners. One corner held a clunky PC with faded stickers. Ethan clicked into the camera archives. He found the hallway camera. Tuesday morning, Totty hit play. He watched himself arrive. At 8:12 a.m., same hoodie, same backpack. He stood by his locker. Then he stayed there, not fidgeting, not shifting weights, not blinking. He stood absolutely still for over 3 hours. Ethan's chest tightened. He clicked fast forward. He watched a janitor walk past, glance at him, and keep going, as if Ethan were just part of the wall. Then something stranger. At 11:39 a.m., the footage glitched. A smear of static crawled over the screen. Ethan's figure twitched for a frame, warped, stretched, like a bad VHS tape. His neck elongated for just a second, then back to normal. Ethan pressed pause, then rewind, then forward again. The glitch stayed exactly the same. He leaned closer. What is happening to me? Behind him, the door creaked. He spun. No one, only silence. That thick kind of silence that makes your skin feel too tight. He closed the footage, deleted the copy he'd made. He wasn't sure why. Maybe part of him didn't want proof. The next day he tried to talk to Mr. Drenner after class. "Sir, I was here yesterday. Third period. You didn't mark me." Mr. Drenner blinked slowly. "You transferred last semester, right?" Ethan's stomach dropped. "No, I've been in your class all year." The teacher frowned, then walked away without another word. In the hallway, a group of students laughed near Ethan's locker. He stood directly beside them. No one turned. He waved, snapped his fingers. Nothing. It was like he was becoming background noise, less real. With each passing minute, that night, he stared into the mirror in his bedroom. His face was pale. There were smudges under his eyes, like sleep had forgotten him. He spoke his name out loud. It felt foreign. He reached for his yearbook, flipped to last year's page. No picture. His name wasn't there either. He checked the student portal, record not found. He opened his phone gallery. The photo with his friends, the one they took just a few weeks ago. He remembered the day, the sun, the pizza place. The photo showed 5 people. He had been the 6th, gone, as if someone had erased him from time with a careful hand. He looked up, back into the mirror, and for the briefest moment he wasn't there either. Just the empty room behind him. Until his reflection blinked. Part 10. Run, but where to? It started raining just as I decided to run. Not a thunderstorm, not a heavy downpour, just a slow, persistent drizzle that felt like it was trying to press me back into the ground with every drop. Like the sky was, gently warning me, don't bother. But I ran anyway. I didn't grab my backpack. I didn't look back at the empty hallway. I just moved. Past the library, past the classrooms, past the cafeteria where the lights flickered like a pulse. The air had that metallic scent, again like static electricity, like something old, and watching doors slam shut behind me. I didn't turn to check. Outside, the world looked normal. Sort of. Kids were walking, cars were parked, the sun fought through clouds in brief flashes. But the moment my foot hit the sidewalk, the world shifted like a record skipping. I blinked and I was back inside, standing at my locker, exactly where this all began. My breath caught. My fingers shook as I touched the cool metal. No one was. Around. I walked away again, slower this time, down the corridor, into the stairwell, through the side doors. This time I ran toward the main gate, crossed the parking lot. My feet scraped the pavement, knees burning. I reached the edge of the street and blinked. The hallway again, same spot, same locker, same humming light overhead. My heart pounded in my ears, not just from exertion from something else, something deeper, like the rules were broken, like I had slipped into a script someone else was writing, and I had no idea where the next scene would go. I tried again, out the science wing, past the gym, through the broken fence behind the bleachers. I ran until my legs gave out, my knees in the grass, tears stinging my eyes. And when I looked up, my locker, sitting there, mocking me. That's when I noticed the note, folded neatly. No name, just one word in thick red pen. Now it's too late. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stared. I walked, slowly, past the front office, past the buzzing silence of classrooms still full of motionless students, into the security room. The monitors glowed, and there I was, not walking, not running, standing in front of my locker, still UNMOV, and still INMOV. Hours ticked by in the footage. My figure never shifted, never scratched an itch, just stood there, like a mannequin, with its switch flipped off. I turned to the corner of the room. A mirrored dot, just a utility mirror, slightly smudged. The kind that usually doesn't show much of anything except a warbled reflection. But in it, I wasn't standing. I was smiling. A wide, vacant smile stretched across a face that felt like mine but looked wrong. Eyes too dark, shoulders slightly bent the wrong way. A grin that didn't belong to anything human. And then the smile in the mirror tilted its head, but I hadn't moved. My reflection blinked, but I hadn't. My mouth opened slowly, and though no sound came out, I read the words on its lips. Welcome back. I stumbled back, hit the monitor bank. The screens all flickered, static bleeding through. For a split second, every camera showed the same thing. My locker and me, just standing there. I ran again. I didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe panic, maybe some sliver of myself still believed there was a way out. But every hallway bent, every door turned in on itself, every corner led me back, until I stopped in the middle of the hallway, light flickering, air to still, and I whispered to myself, barely breathing, I was never meant to leave. Somewhere in the building, a bell rang, but no one moved. No footsteps, no chatter. Just the low, almost mechanical hum of a school that was breathing on its own now. And in that hum, I heard something else. Laughter, not loud, not cruel, just soft, persistent, and close. I turned toward my locker. The mirror from the security room was now hanging on the door. My reflection stood perfectly still, smiling.
Hello everyone, I'm Ceoz Stories. Thank you for staying with me until the very last moment. If that story gave you chills, made you jump, or simply kept your eyes glued to the screen, don't hesitate to hit the like button to support the channel. Share this video with friends who enjoy these sensations too, and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts, or even share strange things you've personally experienced, because I'd love to immerse myself in your stories as well. If you're eager to keep exploring untold mysteries, shadows that remain nameless, then subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. A new door will open every day. Are you ready for the next story?